Hi, class. This is Miss Pearl Morgan checking in this evening, reporting on chapter 26. Mental health illness was the chapter I decided to go with from our science textbook. This science textbook here. So, this was a very interesting and sensitive topic for me. And I'm just very appreciative that this assignment came upon us today. And I'll get a little bit into the chapter by starting off with the author of this chapter, Paul Raeburn. He's a author. He began his career as an author, which was a memoir to discuss the honest and brutal and raw truth of having children with mental illness. So, in the beginning of chapter 26, titled Mental Illness, in the beginning of this chapter, Paul discusses how hard it has been to, the sensitive part and the emotional side of having children with mental illnesses. But he goes on to break down not only I'm sorry, let me cut my television off. He goes on to talk about not how just so much the emotional aspect, but the insurance aspect, the government's role aspect in mental illnesses, physicians aspects in the roles of children's lives with mental illnesses. This is such a deep topic to me, and I just really truly believe that certain medications are not for children. But that is the opinion of Pearl Morgan, and I want to still talk about what Paul thought about, medication and how it actually assisted his children in getting better from the illness. He did in the chapter with a happy ending. However, throughout the chapter, it was not a happy mood. This entire experience that he went through with his two children, a boy and a girl, both being diagnosed with a mental illness, was very hard for him to get through. It was a very hard transition from becoming a reporter on something that interests him, which was just a normal researcher. That was his occupation before he was told that his children had a mental illness. After being told that his children were suffering from a mental illness, this inspired Paul to change his focus and transition into studying medicine and psychiatry, but mainly psychiatry. And I'm sure that would be because every time that he did, I'm sure that every time that he did talk to an administrator about his children, they recommended a psychiatrist. So that inspired him to take his focus and study psychiatry and see exactly what he could do to assist his sick children, because it's not a game. He really had to dig hard and find research on how to assist his children. How can I play my part in making them feel comfortable when they go to school? How can he, Paul, play his role in being a father to two children that suffer mental illnesses and that just need, to feel a sense of purpose? And if I apologize if I have not stated what that mental illness was. So here at the 5-minute mark, I will tell you all what those mental illnesses were. and that would be depression, bipolar. That's what his baby girl and Paul Raeburn, baby boy, suffered from. Okay, Paul is a very intelligent person, as we can see. He did not discuss that this was a genetic type of disease that his children had contracted. He never said that it was in his family or they had a reason. That's where the intellectual part comes in, where psychiatrists have to tell us, where did it come from? Why on earth did it just fall into my children's lap to suffer, when I just really would have preferred for my children to have a normal life? So, Paul goes on to just tell us about how it was not genetic. It was just, that is the science of mental illness. It's not. It doesn't necessarily have to be hereditary or genetics. Sometimes these mental illnesses are just something that is functioning in our brain, which is an organ, something that he discussed, which is a way more sensitive organ, the really the most sensitive organ in our body. So the conflict that Paul had in this chapter that I really related to was what the psychiatrists are being taught to receive licensure and to, cancel and these different things. What exactly was the psychiatrist taught about behavior and exactly the brain, not just behavior and emotions and, not just those aspects. Paul wanted to know what did the psychiatrists and what exactly were they taught about a child's brain. So he goes on to tell us that psychiatrists are not always highly trained. Insurance does not always cover the best psychiatrists or counselors, and how different families he has interviewed, they seem to have went from psychiatrist to psychiatrist to psychiatrist to no specific answers and no improvement in that family or that child's life. Medication diagnosis, the mental illness diagnosis, there was still really no solution from one of the highest paid careers in this medical industry. So Paul just goes on to tell us about these different methods on which we can try to help our children regain their consciousness or regain their self-esteem. That is what Paul was really talking about in chapter 26. I thought it was a great way to put exposure onto medications and how they're not always the solution. Psychiatrists are not always the solution, and if that would be the solution, then they would have to be a very highly experienced person. That is what Paul was saying in the story. Paul went on to become a writer in the Business Weekly, an editor. So I'll wrap it up, and I enjoyed talking to you about chapter 26. It was a great chapter to read, and again, that was in our Blum book, A Field Guide for Science Writers. That is the chapter that we chose out of course. So I hope you all enjoyed my lesson and have a blessed night.